Hello, everyone. It's Bill here again, and I want to take a few moments to talk about some concepts that people will frequently encounter and to spread some light on things. This may be a little bit longer of a video than you're used to, but that's because I want to get into some details and to some nuts and bolts here. The first thing I want to talk about is this concept that's out there called the left-hand path and the right-hand path. Where to begin? For those of you that are familiar with magic and metaphysics, you know that these two terms are used quite often, quite extensively, and really, if you get six people in a room, you're going to get six different answers. Let's just call it for what it is. Now, the idea of the right-hand path and the left-hand path is a byproduct of this polarity-based dualistic illusionary world we find ourselves in. People have this idea that if it's not one thing, it's another. And scientifically, that's 100% true. But a lot of times people dumb this concept down to right hand path being white magic and left hand path being black magic. And if you're asking yourself, what does that mean? I've been dealing with this for years and I still have no idea. The definitions shift almost instantaneously every flippin' day. Now, for those of you that are experienced on your spiritual development path, you know that ultimately there's no such thing as right-hand path. There is no such thing as left-hand path. There is simply the path. Okay? Okay. So let's take a look at this. In metaphysics, it's taught that when something is positive on one plane, it is seen as negative on the plane above it. Now, I'm sure there are those of you that are watching this thinking negativity, well, I don't need that. When I say negative and positive here, I'm talking more nodes of a battery and electrical currents and energy and things like that. So when one thing's positive, the plane above it, it's seen as negative. So if something's a right-hand path or white magic or whatever you want to call it on this plane, that means it's the opposite on the plane above us, which is the plane we can't see clearly. And the left-hand path is true as well. It's seen as evil or whatever terms you want to use to describe it this decade, when in reality, on the plane above us, it's actually white. So what does this mean? What this means is that the terms left-hand path and right-hand path are divisionary terms that are used to separate things out, but have no real basis in critical thinking, logic, or thought. There is simply the path. Each one of us walks our own individual path. Sometimes we do things that are self-serving, and some would say that's a characteristic of the left-hand path. Sometimes we do things that serve all, and that is sometimes said as a characteristic of the right-hand path. So we flip-flop back and forth on it continually as we grow, evolve, and change. Now, the reason that I'm pointing this out is because sometimes when you look up something and it has the term left-hand path attached to it, it can be a real turnoff if you don't know these simple concepts. So I encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and simply explore and see what works best for you. There are some people out there that will only work with one facet of the path or the other, and that is their free will choice and that is their right, but not one path is better than the other. As a matter of fact, it takes both sides to make any kind of spiritual progress happen. The easiest way to understand the difference between the left-hand path and the right-hand path is that the right-hand path is the path of masculinity, whereas the left-hand path is the path of femininity. For those of you that are familiar with the Kabbalah, I'm sure the image of the lightning bolt and the serpent come to mind, or the flaming sword and the serpent. For those of you that are not into Kabbalism, I would encourage you to look up these concepts to see where I'm going with this. Now, masculine energy is very proactive, as I'm sure any of you that have seen a man do something impulsively stupid will know. And generally, feminine energy is open and receptive to messages that come about from the universe and interpretation thereof, and then a plan of action. So there are two vastly different mental concepts that come into play here. Speaking of spiritual growth and a spiritual path, though, there's something else I'd like to take a few moments to discuss, and that's the idea of spiritual but not religious. We know this phrase, right? I mean, as a matter of fact, it's been talked about by the six media conglomerates to death, and there are more and more studies that say that people are spiritual, not religious. What does that mean? Well, honestly, it means a whole bunch of nothing. You know what spiritual is? Spiritual is when somebody works with spirit. That's channeling, that's mediumship, that's working with your spirit guides and teachers, that's working with etheric beings to create the life that you want in line with your vision and your will. And that is working with all things that are not physical. So, here's a little test. Next time you hear someone say they're spiritual, not religious, engage them in their practice of mediumship. Engage them in discussing how they communicate with spirits, autonomous, individualized consciousness beings that are not physical. If they say they stay away from it, they're not spiritual. They're not religious. What is really being talked about here is the fact that more and more people are being drawn to personal development rather than finding that development through an old aeon religion. So when somebody says they're spiritual, not religious, and they can't back it up with any kind of spirit working that they're doing in their life, then that tells you that they are more focused on personal development, not spirituality. A lot of you that have taken my classes and seen other videos know that I use the term personal development quite a bit, and that's the term that I like to stick to because that's what it is. Somebody can be well along the path of spiritual development and not really be interested in personal development. As a matter of fact, spiritual gifts is in no way indicative or related to morality or a moral code. Somebody can have extremely strong gifts of working with spirit or spirits in its many form and really be a jerk of a human being. I think we've all encountered those people. And the worst case scenario is they are actually very fraudulent. So what this means is as we go through our day-to-day life, it's wise for us to differentiate between these the personal development that we do and the spiritual development that we do. They're not the same. Can they be the same? Sure, of course they can. But I encourage you to ask yourself, where are you focused? Are you focused on spiritual development? And if so, congratulations. Are you focused on personal development? If so, congratulations. Are you focused on both? If so, congratulations. Are you focused on neither? Well, if you're focused on neither, you're fighting a losing battle because the only constant is change. So if we don't enact change, change will be enacted upon us. As I jokingly say a lot of times, it's like metaphysical Miranda rights. We can either choose it or it will be done unto us. Now, I realize this is a little bit longer, so I'm going to wrap it up for now. For those of you that may not be aware, my Indiegogo campaign is still going, so check it out on facebook.com/418 Ascendant, or let me know, and I look forward to where we find ourselves come spring equinox, when the new year truly begins. Have a lovely day. Blessings.